How about that?
I know enough to be dangerous too.
I know that you. There's the visible evidence. I'm just a friendly little guy. I don't cause trouble for anybody. Welcome to our show. Today we have Nancy Hollander, who's a lawyer's lawyer by far. I know her from NACDL, the National Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers, and the motto of that organization is Liberty's Last Champion. If there's one who fits that bill, it is Nancy Hollander. Her legal practice in New Mexico was started in 1980, I believe. She specializes in criminal law, international law, human rights. She's admitted to states and federal courts across the nation, which comes with practicing long and hard as a lawyer, a trial lawyer, and other kinds of law in America. She speaks gently but firmly and fails to miss the facts or the law. In fact, they are her assistant in every argument, that the Constitution enables us to do what we can do, and those who violate it or ignore the facts are in the wrong place in the cases. And that's the zone where Nancy finds the opportunity to be helpful to the accused. And I often say I represent the abused and misunderstood. And I think that's what happens in the criminal law. Now, you may know that in the past, she represented Chelsea Manning and successfully won her release. But I thought we would focus on the man from Mauritania, how Nancy helped Mohamedou Ould Slahi. It's a significant case, and I think it's most relevant because right now we're talking about our relationship with the Middle East, and we don't know enough about how America handles these situations, particularly after they've happened. And we're talking about 9/11, of course. Mohamedou obtained his freedom from his unlawful detention and torture at Guantanamo prison. In the popular movie, The Mauritanian, out this year, Jodie Foster plays Nancy. Now, Nancy plays a better Jodie Foster than Jodie Foster plays a Nancy, but that's it. And she gives us an image of her some 10 to 15 years earlier when this case began. Now, the movie strives to capture the truth. Nancy dealt with the truth. A friend of mine once was asked if he wanted to play the role of Telly Savalas, and wouldn't you rather do that? And he says, no, I chase the two-legged animal, the most dangerous animal on earth, the defendant. So he had no interest in play acting. He wanted to do the real thing. That's what Nancy has done. Well, while we're talking about what it means to have suffered 9/11 and invaded Iraq and Afghanistan and done things in Pakistan, I thought it would be relevant to hear from a lawyer who believes that facts are stubborn and the law and Constitution are our guide by which we must adhere. And also, we learn a little bit about ourselves that is not normally spoken about, because Nancy, for speaking the truth and following the law and the Constitution at a time when our public leaders seem to ignore it more often than not, I thought it would be important for Nancy to speak to we the people about what she does and why she did it. Welcome, Nancy. Glad you could join us.
Thank you. Thank you, John.
Yes.
Happy to be here.
I'm glad for that. Well, let's start with something a little frivolous. What personality trait of yours did Jodie Foster actually capture of the original, that is, of you, as opposed to play acting?
She captured, of course, my red lipstick and red nail polish. She captured, I think, a character trait. I think, you know, some people have said that I'm kind of like a mother bear with my clients. Nobody gets between me and them. And I think she captured that. She's meaner than I am. And she says she plays a meaner Nancy, that she plays a Nancy who is not as nice as I am. Now, my friends have said that's not true, that I am like that. And I hate to think I'm like that. I don't think I'm as rude as she makes me. I would not go to somebody at a lunch table and do what she did. But other than that, I think she did an amazing job, given that we spent very little time together. But I think she watched some videos of me also.
Having seen you over the years out of court, it does strike me that when you present, it's soft spoken, but it is the content of what you say and the action that you seek that are so compelling. I think it was Harry Truman once said that they accused me of uh, sending them to hell. And he says, no, that's not what I do. I speak the truth and it feels like hell. And I think that that's true of your advocacy. And people having access to you who need to be persuaded, I think are more persuaded by your manner. But I think trying to sum up into a couple of hours, a very complicated story is very hard. And
they did a really good job. They did a really good job.
There was a moment, and I don't know if it happened, when Mohamedou was very depressed and you came and he asked you in the film, why were you there? You know, what did you have me sign or anything like that? And you said you were just there for him. And this sort of fits what you just said about the mama bear. Was that?
And that went on for years. That was true. But that sums up years. There were years when nothing was happening in his case, both before the government's factual return in 2008, and because he was there, I started representing him in 2005. And then after we won his habeas, and Judge Robertson said he should be immediately released, and of course he wasn't, the government appealed. And then nothing happened from 2010 until 2016. And those years, all we did, Terry Duncan, my co-counsel, and I, was go to visit him. And we were doing things. We were filing motions, trying to get something to happen, but nothing was happening. So they were really social calls. We spent, time with him.
What do you think is
time?
And I'm sure he appreciated it. It sure seemed to reflect itself both in the clips of him actually at the end of the movie and those portrayed by the actor, who was remarkable. I mean, it was just amazing. What do you think is the significance of this case above and beyond the personal liberty of Mohamedou Slahi?
Well, the significance of his case was simply that we were able to get him out and nothing much happened then. The book came out before he was released. And the book was, but the book Guantanamo Diary, which is what's the movie bought the rights to the book.
Right.
And it came out in 27 different languages. It was all over the place. And the movie now, I think what is significant about Mohamedou's case is the movie and what it has generated, that people are learning about Guantanamo again. It had been forgotten. Everyone thought, I talk to people about it all the time. I talk to anyone I'm sitting next to on an airplane.
Right.
They say, oh, it's still open? Really? Well, aren't they all terrorists? Whatever.
Right.
I thought we closed it a long time ago. So it's bringing it back into the conversation. And I think the ending of the war in Afghanistan also is bringing it back into the conversation.
When you were becoming a lawyer, to turn the spotlight on you again, the misogynists didn't believe that a woman should be a lawyer or a trial lawyer, certainly. What treatment did you suffer, if any, in that period?
Well, I was raised by a very strong woman who's I'm much like her. She was small. She was pretty soft-spoken, and very soft-spoken, but she was the vice president of a huge company. And she paved the way for a lot of things that women had not done in Dallas, Texas. She got a club to let her in that had been male only. And she said, well, I have to bring my guests here, when I'm entertaining, and my husband isn't always with me. So I learned how early on how to be a strong woman. So that helped me in ways that other women, it's a gift that other women often don't have. But I had funny things happen to me. I can give you two quick examples if you
Sure.
want.
Yes.
Well, three actually. One was very early in my career. I actually started practicing in 1978 because I was a state public defender for a couple of years before I moved to the firm. And while I was there one day, fairly early on, I was in a courtroom, not in front of a jury, I'm sure. I don't think I would have done this in front of a jury, but who knows? And the judge kept saying things like, gentlemen, approach the bench. And one time I just sat there and he said, Miss Hollander, I told you to approach the bench. And I said, no, you didn't, sir. You asked the men to approach the bench. Well, he said, please come into my chambers. And everybody said, oh, you're going to get it now. And he said, I don't know what to do. I've never had a woman in my courtroom, in a criminal defense for sure, and some kind of contested advocacy. What should I do? And I said, well, you could call us men half the time and women half the time, or just call us all counsel. And he said, what a great idea. That's what I'll do. It had just never occurred to him. And then I was in federal court, not much after that. It had to have been after I was about 1980. It was the Cairo case. I remember it's a case that ultimately went to the Supreme Court. And Judge Biamonte, I think it was, said to me, or Judge, no, it was Judge Burciaga. I always get those two confused. Judge Burciaga said, I'm going to introduce everyone to the jury when the jury comes in. And Miss Hollander, how do you want to be introduced as Miss MS Hollander or Mrs. Hollander? Now, this is 1980. The idea of MS period had just recently come into play. And I said to him, well, Your Honor, you don't comment on the marital status of the men. So Ms. would be appropriate. And he scowled at me and said, okay. But how else was I to explain that to him?
Right.
I could have just said Ms. and then every single woman would have to go through the same thing. This way, it was settled once and for all, at least in his courtroom. And so things like that happen. But, I went to try I'll tell you one other quick one. I went to try a murder case in North Dakota, Bismarck, North Dakota. And we were getting set up. I had local counsel there, a wonderful, wonderful guy, Tom Dixon. And I said to him, and this was mid 80s. And I said to him, can I wear pants? What's the deal here? And he said, I don't know. The only woman in court in criminal cases is the district attorney. Go ask her. So I said, okay. And I go and knock on her door and she answers and I tell her I'm representing my client. She says, well, I'm not involved in that case. I said, I didn't come to talk to you about the case. I came to talk to you about what I should wear. And she laughed and she said, in that case, come in, let's have some coffee. And we talked about it. And she said, in that particular courtroom, I would advise you to wear pants. Otherwise, I'm sorry, to not wear pants, to wear a dress, not wear pants, right?
More conservative judge, I guess. Yes.
Right. And, things like that. But we've gotten through that. And I think women are now accepted in all the courts. There are a lot of criminal defense women lawyers now and prosecutors.
Now, why were you drawn to criminal law as opposed to, you probably have done a variety of different kinds of cases, but if there's anything that you've concentrated on, it's criminal law cases.
I've done very little other cases. I had a landlord-tenant case at the beginning, and I had a couple divorces just when I was getting started with the firm. But I went to law school to become a criminal defense lawyer. That was all I cared about. And I don't really know how to do much else. I did have a big civil rights case, and I've done those. And one, of course, that went to the Supreme Court, and I argued it. But in those cases, I've always had co-counsel, my partner, John Boyd, usually, who's a First Amendment and civil rights expert. And, he would do things like write the complaint, answer the interrogatories. I mean, I did the expert depositions because I love dealing with experts. But I don't really know. I had to learn how to do them every time. And I've never done anything else and have no interest in anything else.
What is it about the value of criminal cases, the focus that you have in a criminal case, that makes you choose that as compared to any other kind of law?
Criminal cases are not about the law.
Mm-hmm.
They're about the person who has been charged, the accused, whether it's a person or a corporation, but usually a person who's been accused, and about forcing the government to do whatever it's going to do correctly. When an accused is in trial or even charged, it's the only time that you're actually going to war against your own government. And you've got to have someone there to stand with you, at least, and protect you and make sure the government does it right and follows the law. But it's about who those people are. You know, what happened to them. It's usually the worst 5 minutes of their entire life that they wish they could take back in many cases. Or the drug cases, which I had many of those. And the clients would say, look, I screwed up, right? I knew it was illegal. Do the best you can. Try to get me out of it. If you can't get me out of it, get me the lowest sentence you possibly can. It's not like I didn't know it was illegal, you know? And so they're great. They were always great clients. But I've always been able to connect to the person somehow. And even though the case came and went and it was over, but I think, and I wrote a book with my first husband, Todd Gitlin. We wrote a book when we were community organizers in Chicago. And we did a lot of criminal, I mean, we took people to court. I met my son's father because I took him to court. We followed the police paddy wagons in Chicago, because in Chicago, at least at that time, this was in the 70s, the police, the paddy wagons were the ones that captured people. And so we followed them. And we followed them. I was a photographer and I had my Nikon, and there was a local guy there who had a Brownie. And so the theory was, if the cops got pissed off at me and wanted to take my camera, I would manage to switch it with him somehow. He would take it and be out of there, and I'd have the Brownie, which had nothing on it. Right. That was our theory. Never happened, but it almost happened once. But that's what I did in Chicago, and so that's what I wanted to do as a lawyer.
You and Todd Gitlin must have been quite a pair in those heydays.
Yeah, we were, but we were only together for a couple of years.
Yes, well, I have some experience with that myself. Melvin Belli, when I was a young man, came and in mid-Manhattan at one of our mahogany-filled rooms, gave a speech, and he was really on that day, and he talked about how he was called a mob lawyer, and you have been called a terrorist lawyer. And he says, why don't they confuse a priest and a penitent? They never say that about a priest. Is this a simple misunderstanding or a gross misunderstanding about the Sixth Amendment? How do you characterize that?
Well, I wrote that headline that said, I'm a terrorist lawyer. I'm proud of it. Usually headlines are written by editors. And somebody called me after that and said, oh, they should not have titled it that way. That's really bad. And I said, no, I titled it that way. It was an op-ed originally in the International Herald Tribune and in the New York Times. But interestingly, the Herald Tribune actually printed it. The New York Times only put it online and never printed it. But it's a confusion in, and it's the same thing, I think, with mobs and to some extent, and with gangs. Terrorism should not be a crime. It shouldn't be a crime we shouldn't call people terrorists, because we should call them, you know, maybe they're accused of murder or rape or ethnic cleansing or genocide or whatever. But if you say that someone is a murderer, if you say that Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, who's charged with the 9/11 case, is a murderer, he's accused of murdering 3,000 people, you focus on him. If you say he's a terrorist, now you're focusing on his ethnicity or his religion or his group, and it's a mistake, because Muslims, I mean, people now think Allah Akbar means go to war. I mean, it's God is great, and said at the end of every Muslim prayer, and said at the end of many Christian prayers. The fact that it's been hijacked by a group of people is what happened. But I would never say Islamic terrorists. I would say murderers or whatever they are. We don't say Christian anti-abortionists, when they go in and kill people. We don't have domestic terrorism as a crime, and I'm in favor of not having it as a crime, because it also gives the police and the prosecutor more power. And we have extra sentencing for someone who's accused of, quote, terrorism, but it's hard to define. There's no international definition of terrorism, by the way, and there never will be, ever, because it can't be defined and it's too vague, and we need to not have it. And that was my point in that article, is that when I represented somebody who raped a 3-year-old child, nobody said, oh my God, have you raped any children? Or if I represented somebody who stole a lot of money, nobody accused me of stealing it. But when I represented someone charged with terrorists, all of a sudden, Dick Cheney, etc., are calling me, I shouldn't be doing that. I'm as bad as they are. So that's what the point of that article was. And I think it's true of people who represent the mob. They're representing a person charged with a crime or a group.
Yeah, I once made a mistake and appeared on Sean Hannity's show, and he and I had an extended discussion on this very issue, and I refused to accept his language, which you have just decried as inappropriate. Talk about the person's offense, the actual crime itself.
Right.
And in a break, but not on the air, he called me a lunatic with a bow tie. I wear it as a red badge of courage. Now, some DC doyens said that Edward Bennett Williams didn't have to take those mob cases. They don't have to have Williams representing them. They weren't entitled to that representation. What reaction did you get representing Mr. Slahi when others could represent him? And if I remember correctly, I think you gave an interview in which you said there was a point at which you were concerned that not capable enough, experienced enough lawyers might end up appearing to give credibility to a process that might not even approximate fairness.
Well, it was at the beginning of Guantanamo, and we had a discussion at NACDL about should we represent these people? And my position at first was no. We will give credibility to, and at that time it was it was even more of a fraud, the commissions, than they are now at the very beginning. And but it took about a minute or two, and someone said, if we don't represent them, they are going to get really bad lawyers, and it's going to make bad law. And we have to do this. We have to, I mean, the military was saying we didn't have any confidentiality, which later became an issue that forced some people to quit a case, but quit my case. But, I decided that's correct. And I really wanted to do a trial. I wasn't interested in doing a habeas case. But then the one client who I was kind of getting hooked up with didn't want any lawyers. So then I just waited, and then Salahi just dropped from the sky, that case.
I see. Now, correct me as this is from what I think is correct public information, but it may not be accurate. If I understood correctly, he was not charged with anything when he was taken into custody in 2002. And this remained the case without them ever proving any charge through October 17th, 2016. Is that right?
Correct. That is correct. He was never charged. Colonel Couch was the prosecutor assigned to him, and he's in the movie. Benedict Cumberbatch plays him. It's quite accurate. Stu Couch is now an immigration appellate judge, but he's retired from the Marines. But he refused to prosecute, and it was an amazing thing for a Marine to do, a right-wing religious Marine, and he did it. And then one of the judges at one point along the way, after we won our case, and we were, it may have been after we won, maybe before, I don't remember when, but one of the judges said to the government, after I explained all this, well, that happens. Prosecutors leave a case, but you get another prosecutor. Mm-hmm. And you've never done that in this case. And the government just said, no, we haven't. And they didn't, because they didn't have anything. So we won the habeas case. I mean, that's the only one. Judge Robertson had 3 cases, the other 2 lost in front of him. And, you know, the government didn't have to prove much. It's a preponderance of the evidence, you know,
right.
As lawyers, we say, yeah, you just got to go a little bit over here. They couldn't do that at that time. And it had already been 8 years. And the judge said, you know, you got to let this guy go. You can't keep him just because you think maybe he did something. And I mean, and the prosecutor would say things like, use the word jihad, so that the judge would have to say, well, you think that means terrorist? It doesn't mean that. Mm-hmm. And then they kept accusing him of having joined Al-Qaeda in 1990 and not withdrawing, as though this were a criminal case where you have to withdraw from a conspiracy. And of course it wasn't. And I said to the judge at one point, I think we joined Al-Qaeda in 1990. We paid for the Stinger missiles that shot down the Russians and made the Russians go home, basically. He said, yes, Miss Hollander, we've all seen Charlie Wilson's War, the movie
right,
about that. But he also wrote that had nothing to do with 9/11. Just because it was called Al-Qaeda, which means the service organization. And he trained with them, with the Mujahideen, when we were supporting them and encouraging people to go. He was in Germany, and the Germans actually had an office in Germany where you could get the appropriate visa to go and join. So, you know, it was ridiculous. They never had anything. And so he just sat there, because what happened was all the cases that were won, the habeas cases, and about 70% of them were getting won. Almost, there may have been a couple that the government didn't appeal. But during Obama's term, when President Obama said, we want to shut Guantanamo, his Department of Justice under Eric Holder appealed them. Now, why? We won. Why not just say, great, go home? That's one less. Right. But they appealed them to the DC Court of Appeals, which adopted some, it's very complicated what they did, but they made it impossible to win, basically. And so we were remanded, fortunately, and not reversed. But the district judges, when they got those cases back, just sat on them.
Did nothing.
And yes. They did nothing. And I think, I don't know this to be true, but I think they did nothing because they didn't want to go back to that court. And Judge Robertson retired right after our case. We had Judge Sullivan for a while, which was great, because then we got a whole bunch of discovery, because the government was all afraid of him because of what had happened in the Alaska case, right, where they didn't provide discovery and they all got in trouble. And so we got a whole bunch more stuff, but most of it was all worthless stuff, but we got it. And then Judge Lambert got the case and he didn't touch it. And, so he just sat there.
is judge a verb or a noun. And in this case, it served their purposes to be a noun and do nothing.
That's right.
Now, the Lieutenant Colonel Couch,
Just like a couch.
in the movie, I found it a fascinating moment, which I was wondering if it was a summing up or an actual event, in which they have a little shop there for souvenirs at Guantanamo. And then your alter ego, Jodie Foster, sits down with Lieutenant Colonel Couch. And it looks like a fairly comfortable professional conversation back and forth. And he asks you, Jodie Foster, so how could you defend these people? And then you say, I'm doing it. I'm talking about the law and the Constitution. But I was wondering, A, if that conversation actually happened as opposed to being a summary of events. And when you said that, and he was played as a very intelligent man in the movie, did you have to go through and say, look, do you want to be held without being charged? Do you want to be tortured? Did you go through? I was wondering what the dynamic was.
That actually didn't happen, but they had to squeeze events, right? There is a gift shop that looks just like that one, but it's not right where they put it. And there is a little subway at the airport. So, you know, that could happen. But I actually did not meet Stu Couch until afterwards. I didn't know anything about him till Jess Braven in the Wall Street Journal called me and asked if there were any letters of Mohammedou's that we would release for an article that he was writing that he thought we would like. And that was really all he told us. And we released that one letter where Mohamedou says, and it's in the movie, actually in the letter, and this is all public now, right. In the letter, I say, it was very early on in our relationship, 2005. I say, look, can you write down everything your interrogators ask you? And he was actually kind of angry at me. And he said, I was interrogated for 18 hours a day for a year. That's like asking Charlie Sheen how many girlfriends he's had. Yes. And he wrote that. And so we thought, well, we'll just release this one. And, you know, we knew he trusted me to make that decision. Right. And that's in the movie. He does say it in the movie. Right. But that's where we learned about Stu Couch. We learned that they had been planning Mohamedou to be their first death penalty case. And so after that, I called him. And we proceeded to have a lot of conversations. They were always friendly. But at first he said, look, I think he's probably guilty. They just haven't found the evidence. And if they find it, I'll be the first to, you know, he didn't say stick the needle in, but he basically said, I'll get back in this case. And then later he said, all right, you've convinced me. Judge Robertson found nothing. It's now been 8 years. I am convinced. And he's become a friend.
Well, he said in the movie, he says something that's interesting. You're sitting in a room with file boxes, many of which are stricken black, you know, redacted to the point of exhaustion. And he in the movie has a conversation with your alter ego, in which he says, well, have you looked at box 32? So was there box 32? And if it's not privileged in some way, can you tell us, was there anything in there that was helpful?
No, they gave him that. And I said, okay, you can give him that. Of course, we found the polygraph because Mohamedou knew he had been tested. And it took us a long time to get it. We knew it existed. Actually, 2 of them existed. And the only thing that's still classified, I think, are the questions or the answers to one of them. But I can't remember what it is. But I know there's part of it that's classified. But it's not classified that there were 2. And we had to file motion to compel after motion to compel to finally get them, which we did. Stu had nothing to do with getting them.
Okay.
Now, whether he looked at them or not, I don't remember.
Well, and in the movie, they have him go into a secure room, which looks like he's looking at what is in box 32. That is,
Well, he's looking at everything,
he's
right?
looking,
I mean, he's
yeah,
looking at the torture, really, is what he's looking at. And in the movie, he's looking at the torture. I'm reading what we say about the torture, the MFRs, the Memorandum for Record, which is what he had been trying to get. And I'm looking at what Mohamedou wrote, and Mohamedou's getting tortured. I mean, in the movie, I thought that was a brilliant thing that Kevin McDonald, our director, did. It was just, I thought that was brilliant.
yes, it really was. You have the images and you have other things going on.
Mm-hmm.
I have what Couch wrote when he walked off the case. He said, Salahi's incriminating statements, the core of the government's case, had been taken through torture, rendering them inadmissible under US and international law. And that part is represented in the movie. I didn't realize that he left after that, because they play a little loose with when people are active and not. Now, they also said in the movie that they were, when they couldn't break him, apparently, they were going to bring his mother to Guantanamo, to Gitmo, and she was going to be raped and she was going to be kept there as a prisoner. Did they make that threat?
Oh, yeah. And Zuli did that. What was Zuli's first name? He's a Chicago cop, and a bad one, who's been accused of torturing people in Chicago to get them to confess. There's a whole event around that, and a movie that was made, and a big investigation of Zuli. And he is Captain Collins. And he was in charge, and he comes in and says, I'm Captain Collins, and he had a letter. What the letter, I think the letter itself it may still be classified, but he had the letter, and essentially, and this is not classified, the letter said, we're gonna bring your mother here. And, and he said to Mohamedou, I don't think I can guarantee her safety. That was all real. And the letter looks totally official.
Yes. Now, they also said in the movie that at one point they took him out to sea, telling him it was going to be an execution. I don't know what that could do to a person who's been through all that torture already, but I'm assuming that that was real as well.
That was real. That was real. And they tried to convince him that he was going somewhere else and was leaving Guantanamo, when in fact they just took him right back to where he'd been. But it was all blacked out, and he didn't, the idea was that he wouldn't know where he was. And yeah, they broke his ribs, and we found it. We got his medical records. We got a lot of stuff early. Later, people had trouble getting things, but we did it fortunately early, and we got his medical records, and it showed the rib breakings, which was essential.
The period before he ended up at Guantanamo, he was in rendition programs at Jordan and Afghanistan, where they were torturing him before he ever got to Guantanamo. And people may forget, but this was a highly critical program, and there was at least one sensational movie about how rendition, quote, didn't work, in the sense of either getting good information or targeting the correct people. But then he comes to Guantanamo, and we had in the Office of Legal Counsel, John Yoo, in I think 2003, saying, well, you can torture offshore. And in that package, he was putting Guantanamo because it was offshore, but it was entirely an American base.
Right, but that was their theory. Their theory was it's not the US, they'll have no lawyers, they'll have no rights, they don't get trials, they get these things called military commissions, no actual trials, no hearings, no right to see the evidence. And in Hamdan, in the case Hamdan, the government, the Supreme Court, that was the first one, said, no, it's ridiculous.
And I think it was Rasul against Bush. They said that habeas did apply. Then
Right,
Congress
that was the
passed a
next
bill
one.
saying, not in our federal courts. And then the Supreme Court came back and said, oh, no, you can't do that. Yes, they do have a
Right.
right to habeas, and they were kicked in again. And that's by, is that Boumediene? Yeah.
Boumediene, yes, that's
Against the court.
Boumediene. Yeah, that says that. And Boumediene has been really become almost irrelevant because of the way it's been interpreted, but by the lower courts. But yes, at first they said, well, they can file all the habeas they want. You just don't have to respond, which was absurd.
Oh,
So it was
yeah.
2008 when the government finally responded to his habeas, which of course had been filed in 2005. Actually, he had handwritten it twice, and they had to combine them into one.
So there's a feeling here that the government, having decided to put these people in a prison and not having any evidence, maybe having, quote, intelligence of questionable reliability, will go to any lengths to justify what they did rather than to investigate what they actually have that justifies punishment or not for a crime that was committed.
Well, they didn't have any crimes except a few. I mean, they have 9/11.
Right.
They have my other client, Abraham al-Nasri, who's accused of being the mastermind, whatever that means, behind the blowing up of the USS Cole in the port in Aden, Yemen, in October of 2000. But they only had a few, and they've only had a few trials, and 3 of those have been reversed. I mean, it's a failed, the whole thing is a failure, but they didn't really have an end game. They just had, this is what we're going to do and we'll get away with it.
Right. They'll wear everybody down.
And once they didn't get away with it, all they could do was continue to justify what they had done rather than do what they should have done, what Obama said he was going to do, and release them. Now, there's one other fact. There were once 779 people there. President Bush released 500. First, he said they were the worst of the worst. Cheney said they would gnaw on the airplane to get it to, you know, I forget, gnaw on the wires of the airplane of the C-17 carrying them to get it to crash. That's how evil they were. And then 500 were just released. And the guys now who are running the Taliban, they were in Guantanamo. But they should never, I mean, nobody should have been there, but they were politicians. They were never soldiers. And they were traded for Bergdorf. So, you know, it makes no sense. They need to close it, period.
When they were collecting the quote intelligence, weren't they basically paying people for the intelligence to target the people that they did focus on and bring to Guantanamo?
Well, they dropped leaflets in Afghanistan and in Pakistan. I've seen them. I have one that says, turn in a terrorist, get $5,000. 85% of them came through those leaflets. There's no intelligence, nothing.
No.
Just somebody says he's a terrorist and they go and snatch him up.
Right. And they get $5,000, success story. And what do they care?
Huge. I mean, that's a huge success story for an Afghan farmer or an Afghan village.
Now,
I mean, that's what happened.
Now, when you spoke about Judge Robertson, he said a couple of things that I thought were right on the point that you've explained. He said, while once Al-Qaeda, it's not clear that he was Al-Qaeda, Mohamedou was, at the time of capture. And the second thing he said that I found persuasive, and it's quite an opinion, he said the associations alone are not enough, of course, to make detentions lawful. Now, I wondered how you prepared, if you did that, and I assume you did, that, of course, in the movie, we have Salahi make a presentation, very moving, very effective, probably shorter than his actual presentation. And I wondered, did it happen something like that? Because it was quite effective in the movie. Well,
it was, you know, it was a cross-examination because they called him as a witness.
Right.
The judge said he didn't have to testify. He wanted to testify. And so it was examination and cross-examination. But the people who made the movie had the transcripts because I gave them the transcript. So it's what he's really said, either right then or in a letter or, you know, to them, because the movie was made, he was out, so he could talk to them. It's all, everything in there is what he actually said. It's just that it's put into a narrative because you don't want to have it as question and answer.
Give and
You never
take.
get
Yeah.
there.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, there is a very moving scene, I thought, very effective, which shows your firmness in the Jodie Foster personality. When your associate, or I don't know if she's an associate or a partner, Teresa Duncan, she reads the statement that was a function of the torture, and she panics. Now, how can I do this? How can I go home for Thanksgiving? How can I possibly do this? And I think it may be the sternest moment for the character Nancy in the movie that Jodie Foster plays. Well, go right away. I don't want to interrupt your Thanksgiving and so forth. Did anything like that happen?
Well, not like that. Terry would never do that. She took a hit for the movie, basically. There
Right.
was someone else, another lawyer who did leave, who just all of a sudden withdrew. And it was right after reading the government's factual return. And I think that's why she quit. Terry had other, we never were sure why she quit, but that seemed to be. But they couldn't add a third character, a third lawyer. So Terry agreed to do that as long as she didn't quit. Originally, they wrote it and she said, all right, I quit. And Terry said, no, you have to take my name off, because Terry would never do that. I mean, she was an associate then. She's now a learned counsel in death penalty cases. I mean, she's a brilliant lawyer, always was, but now she has her own firm and does federal death penalty cases. So she would never, much as I wouldn't, care whether a client was guilty or innocent. But the way it was written, she becomes a proxy for the audience, because we know the audience is thinking that at that point, and she's someone they can relate to. The one part of that, now, what I would have done if someone had done that, I wouldn't have done it the way Jodie did, you know, get the
out.
F out, right?
Yeah.
I would have said, you need to reconsider whether you can be a criminal defense lawyer. You are
Right.
off this case. Go home, go have Thanksgiving, but you're not going to be on this case, and I'm not sure you can do this if you care about innocence and guilt. The final words of that scene, if I can say them exactly the way they're said in the movie, can I say that?
Sure.
I got in trouble on CNN for saying
Well, you won't
this.
get in trouble here on.
Okay. She, at the end, where she says, you've got to believe your own shit. Those were my words, and I must have said it to Jodie at some point, because you do, you know, by the time you have to begin to have what's called trial psychosis, you have to believe you can win, even when it's overwhelming. And at that point, it was overwhelming. They had so much stuff that was just, we learned that just was all wrong. But you got to believe, you've got to believe it. And so that I did say that. I mean, I would have said that, and I have said it in many cases.
100 times, right?
100 times.
Now, at the end of the movie, it seems like they try to give back to Terry or Teresa, and you say, "Come work," like you are forgiven. Right. But that didn't. The forgiveness was not necessary and didn't happen.
Didn't happen because she never left.
Life. Yeah, I see.
No, she never left, and the other lawyer never came back.
So for
and I won't say who that is, but I know who it is, and I've seen her. Yes. And I always tell her when, you know, I wrote to her when the book came out, and I wrote to her when the movie came out, but was trying to be gracious. But no, Terry would never do that. Right. She was in there with me from day one. I was there in July of 2005. And she was there in September of 2005. And we saw Mohamedou every 2 months, except when we were in trial. And there was a period where a few months where we couldn't see him because we were both in trial in Dallas for a long trial. But otherwise, we saw him every 2 months for every year, all the time.
Well, Terry was a team player, even in the movie, by taking the slight hit that wasn't true that compromised who she really is. It's
She is a team
hell of a
player, and
lady.
she did that. She did that for the movie, and she said, you know, this is important for the movie, and so I'm going to do it. Yes.
That's good. Now, a couple of final questions I have. What remains to be done for Mohamedou Slahi?
Freedom to travel. We finally got him a visa to the UK. We were about to sue the Home Secretary when they changed their mind. So he was there for 2 weeks. He's been to South Africa with me, because that's where most of it was filmed. And South Africa gave him a visa, but we haven't been able to get him a visa anywhere else. There's a beautiful 6-minute thing that I can send you. It's a dance, and it's singing Amazing Grace, and Mohamedou singing it in Arabic. He translated
that'd be great.
it.
Please do.
I'll send it to you. It's 6 minutes. And it just came out on the 12th, just yesterday. And it's their plea, the Netherlands plea for him. So we continue to battle to get him visas. And there's no reason. I mean, the US government said he's not a security risk. Colonel Couch said, you know, he's not a security risk. Colonel Davis, who was the chief prosecutor at the time, has written, we don't have any evidence that Mohamedou ever did anything, any violent act against the US or its allies. And now Britain has given him a visa, and Britain shares everything with the US. You know, we have this special relationship with the Brits. So they don't think he's a security risk. So why does anyone else? But what happens is they go back and look at the first stuff, and they say, or they talk to someone in the agency, in the CIA, and, you know, they'll never give up on any of their cases.
They won't admit that what they did was not just wrong, but unlawful and brutal and unconstitutional from everything, all the tortures and all the things like that. They
won't admit it. And they also say that their raw intelligence was accurate. So, yes. You know, you and everybody else was wrong.
You would think raw would kind of give it away.
It would give it away, yes.
Yes, and now.
So that's what we're doing now. Mohamedou's written another book. It's a novel. It was published by the Ohio University Press. It's called The Actual True Story of Ahmed and Zarga. It's about a Bedouin who loses his camel. 165 delightful pages. I encourage everyone to read. It's a novel, and it's just delightful.
Talk about the survival of the human spirit.
Yes.
And if I understand correctly, he wrote a book while in prison about how he maintained peace with himself, even in this isolated state.
Right. And we weren't able to get that one out.
What should happen with Guantanamo, Gitmo?
What should happen with Guantanamo is, first of all, everyone who has been cleared for release, and I think there's about 10 already cleared for release, one of them since 2009. They should find somewhere, a home for them, back home if they can go there, or resettlement. And of course, the State Department has to have people who are actively doing this, which it had before, you know, Obama. That's how Mohamedou got out. They just need to get out. They've already been cleared. So then that leaves the ones who are, quote, forever prisoners, who have never been tried, never been charged, but the government claims they're too dangerous to release. Well, that is basically bull. You know, if we don't charge people in this country, we release them. That means they don't have evidence, and they just kind of, there's your raw intelligence again. They kind of think maybe they're bad people. Those people have to go out. That just leaves the ones facing trial, one of whom is mine, and a couple of others, 3 who were just arraigned, who were charged in the day before Trump left, the 3 in the Indonesia case. those cases need to be resolved in a way that is fair, provides due process to the clients. That doesn't necessarily mean moving them to federal court. It doesn't necessarily mean locking them up in Florence, Colorado for the rest of their lives. It means looking at each person as an individual and how do we resolve this case? And it's for the CA to do, it's not the prosecutor, but that's how the military works. But they have to get resolved, period. And then you lock the door and never go back. End of story. It can be done.
It can be done, should be done.
Mm-hmm.
Nancy, now this is a point in your life where you're thinking of stepping back from trial work and considering a whole series of vistas. So what happens to Nancy Hollander going forward?
Well, I still have a couple cases to resolve, and then I have Mr. Al-Nashri. For reasons that would take too long to explain, I don't see him anymore in Guantanamo, not my choice. But I got in a fight with the agency over him. And in any event, I was his first lawyer, so it's one of our best issues, if not our best issue on appeal, that I'm not allowed to see him. But I do his European work. We've won 2 cases for him in front of the European Court of Human Rights against 2 countries. I can't say their names and I can't remember their code names. I think they're brown and black, but I'm not sure. They all have code names. But we got 200,000 euros from those cases. The court found that the prisons did exist, that he was tortured there, that it was the US that did it, and awarded damages. They've also told those countries that they have to keep the US from giving him the death penalty if he ever gets tried. But those cases are still active. We were just in front of the Council of Europe a couple days ago to get the rest of it done. We have a 3rd case that we're going to, codename Violet. Abu Zubaydah already won in front of that court, so we really just have to prove our client was there. I can't confirm or deny that he was, by the way. And we also have a case pending in London. There's a tribunal whose whole task is to examine and investigate abuses of their secret services. Would that we had something like that. But we believe MI6, which is essentially their CIA, interrogated him while he was in the black sites, either directly or through the CIA. That petition is pending. And he is a victim in the International Criminal Court in the case that's known as the Afghanistan situation, but also involves some of the black sites where he may have been. So I do those in the sense that I sort of do them. I'm counsel of record in the ICC. We have local counsel at the moment in Violet and solicitors in London. I have barristers. I have solicitors and barristers and lawyers all over the world dealing with those cases, and I, coordinate them. So that's one thing I do. If for some reason people want me to be on these boards of various things all of a sudden, and on committees, and some of them I'll do and some of them I won't do, but I do have more time now to do them. And so that interests me. And there's some other things that I have in mind to do. And plus, spend some time with my family and travel and see my friends. And, I just went to Botswana and saw animals. So there you have it.
It's been
A lot of
wonderful
things.
having you. And I bet your mother would get a big kick out of the arc of your career. And I do know from being with the lawyers at NACDL and elsewhere, they call you Saint Nancy. And you didn't get paid a dime. You didn't get paid a dime for handling Salahi's case.
No, in fact, my partners, to their credit, said in that first meeting, unlike the movie, they said there was some back and forth, and then one of them said, "This is why we became lawyers. Go and do it, whatever." And it ended up costing well into 6 figures in out-of-pocket costs, not to mention all the time. But we were happy that we did it. I did another one before that took 15 years. That's what my partners have always been like, and they have supported me all the way through, which is I couldn't have done it otherwise.
Wonderful. I'm so glad you could take the time to talk to us, and good luck in your next adventure, including the ones you've identified today. It's nice to be with you.